Our second reading comes from Mark's Gospel, and that can be found on page 47 of your Pew Bible if you'd like to read along. This reading from the New Testament is about a short travel story that bridges Jesus' journey from his Galilean ministry and into his Jerusalem ministry. Just prior to this passage, Jesus has spoken to his disciples about his coming suffering and subsequent crucifixion. On his way to Jerusalem, Jesus, the disciples, and a large crowd passed through the town of Jericho. And on leaving the town, Jesus encounters a blind beggar named Bartimaeus. Let us listen for the word of God. They came to Jericho, and he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho. Bartimaeus, known as son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and ran to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately, he regained his sight and followed him on his way. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
But it is so beautiful outside this time of year, isn't it? I drove to Charleston just yesterday and had a hard time focusing on my driving on the roads as the yellows and the reds and the oranges of the leaves kept luring me and demanding my attention. Can you imagine what it would be like not to be able to see the brilliance of the fall foliage? Well, I can sort of imagine. I have some impairment in the vision department, but with prescription glasses and contact lenses, I can see fairly well. I know some of you have had some difficulties with your sight, but most of all of you here have some ability to see. But for just today, let's take a look, no pun intended, at the figure of blind Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus was not always blind. He once was able to see. Maybe he had the same affliction that Ray Charles had, who lost his sight when he was only 7 years old. He knew the colors of the autumn leaves, and he had memorized the face of his mother and his little brother. And one of the tragedies is remembering the face of his little brother was that they were once playing outside. I think Ray was about 7 and his brother was 5, and they were playing outside, chase or some kind of kids running thing, where the younger brother, who was 5 at the time, fell into a large bucket of water. Well, Ray thought it was funny and started laughing. And then when his brother didn't come out, he knew that there was something that was wrong, so he ran over and he saw that his little brother was underwater. And he tried to pull him out, but because his clothes were all wet and he was heavy with the dampness, he couldn't pull him out, so he ran to his mother. But it was too late. His little brother had drowned, and that was one of the last images Ray Charles had when he still had vision. Who knows why Bartimaeus was blind? One thing that we do know is Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, which is what it means in Greek, was not only blind, but he was also a beggar. He was Jericho's beggar. His name was Bar, son of Timaeus, which means honor, meaning he was a son of honor. Perhaps Bartimaeus had once been a man of honor who had fallen from the top of the socioeconomic scale to the very, very bottom. A man who now only owned one thing, his cloak, his insurance policy against the wicked winter months. His cloak was what defined him, as cloaks would often indicate what place in society someone inhabited. It was perhaps the only vestige of his former life that he had lived back when he could see. Now imagine being one of the disciples. You know, Jericho is not the city it used to be when Joshua brought the walls coming tumbling down. That was Jericho back in the Old Testament. That was a time when Jericho was a vibrant city, rich with palm trees and plantains. It was around 800 feet below sea level, so it was very warm. It was an ancient resort for the wealthy. But during Jesus' time, it was notoriously known as a dangerous place even cursed by God. And if you were a disciple, you would have tried to talk Jesus out of staying there. You would not have slept well during your layover in Jericho, especially since Jesus was acting a little odd himself. He'd been talking about going to Jerusalem and getting handed over to the authorities, being beaten and crucified. You would have been having second thoughts about going to Jerusalem, even if you originally thought the whole idea was great, because maybe that meant Jesus was going to go into the city of David and set things right with the Romans. But that was before he started talking about dying and rising and being a servant of all, and for the first being last and the last being first. Maybe you would be thinking it's about time to call it quits, going back to fishing or mending or tax collecting. But then somewhere along the way, you had fallen in love with Jesus, just as Jesus had done with falling in love with the people that he encountered along the way, just about anybody and everyone who crossed his path. On this particular morning, though, Jesus and the disciples and a major part of the town of Jericho start to head down the 15-mile journey to Jerusalem, when blind Bart, who is sitting just outside the city gates, hears them and cries out to Jesus, "Hey, Son of David, have mercy on me, help me." The shout startles the disciples, you included, and they look over and see the son of Timaeus and think, not another beggar. Make him be quiet. It's a long day's walk to Jerusalem. Don't let Jesus hear him, or we'll be way over dinner time before we get there. So you all shush. Shh. Shh. Bartimaeus, putting your finger to your lips and giving that collective shh. Only this seems to aggravate blind Bartimaeus, and he turns up the volume. "Son of David, have mercy on me. Help me." This time Jesus hears him and tells the disciples to call him to him. Obviously, in these just few exchanges, the crowds and the disciples are looking at the blind beggar with new eyes, seeing him now as someone to congratulate. They tell him, "Take heart, cheer up, he's calling you." Blind Bart is not going to take this news sitting down. He throws off his cloak, he springs up, and he runs. He runs to Jesus, leaving his white cane on the ground.